Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. Another deep red day in the markets. We're going to be discussing that along with a refreshed look at the underlying fundamentals of the Bitcoin mining stocks. We're going to be reviewing the colocation contracts that have already been signed for Core Scientific, Cipher, and TeraWulf, comparing, contrasting the numbers, and giving you our outlook on the sector moving forward. All of that in addition to recent news from the sector in today's video. Before we get into it, take a second, smash the like button, guys. Big help to myself and the channel. Anthony loves it. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comment section below how you're feeling about the Bitcoin mining stocks right now and if you're making any moves during the pullback. With that being said, let's get into today's video. All right, guys, away we go. Wednesday afternoon, a very interesting podcast in store. We're seeing a sell-off across the board in terms of equities and, unfortunately, the Bitcoin mining stocks. We're going to address that first and foremost, and then dive into some of the fundamentals and the existing colocation deals we've seen in the sector to date, really comparing and contrasting some of the numbers and outlook moving forward. So with that being said, Anthony, Bitcoin itself essentially flat over the last 24 hours. It certainly doesn't feel that way. The miners, however, over the last 2 days, giving up a tremendous amount of gains.
They certainly are. And it looks like a lot of the gains that they've achieved over the last month. Remember, on the previous podcast, we talked about the month position where it was really significantly high. I think the average a couple of days ago was around about 54% gains in the last month. And what we've seen is we've seen a lot of those gains pulled back now. I looked earlier on there, the average gain for the month now across our miners is about 18%. So a real big pullback in there. And today's just highlighting that pullback from the miners, all the miners in red. And it's not even the case where some are close to parity today. Mara's doing pretty good and it's down 6% on 24 million shares traded. Bitfarms is down, nearly 15% on 111 million shares traded. And we've talked a lot about the amount of shares traded in Bitfarms over this last 3 or 4 weeks, and it's been regularly into 3 digits. Bear in mind, the average over 3 months is still in the 73 million range. So you can see prior to the last month, there wasn't as many shares, anywhere near as many shares, but the fact it's had a lot of trading last month, it's brought that average volume up for 3 months significantly high as well. HUT's down 20% today, so that's giving up a lot there. And if you look at the day range, it looks like, miners obviously started off in a better position than they are now. They were still red, but they've really pulled back, and that's the challenge we've seen there. But, if you zoom out and look at the month period, all these miners, and we'll come on to the heat map during the podcast, all these miners, I believe, are in green from the month to date positions.
Yeah, it certainly is. If you look across the heat map here, you can see the first 2 columns now just an absolute bloodbath, sea of red. To your earlier point, my account was actually positive for a short moment this morning and then really took a nosedive. But if you do look out to the 1 month, the year to date, even the 1 year change, still quite rosy or green in the Bitcoin miner space.
Yes, it is, and as I say, they've had a significant run, and it looks like to me that there's been a bit of profit taking, and we'll have to monitor this now to see how far this is going to drop down because we've seen some big rises. Even look at the year-to-date change there. Some of these stocks are in 3-digit figure changes now, even though we had a big pullback from the year-to-date. So how far can these stocks go? Time will tell, but we'll be monitoring on the podcast on a regular basis.
We certainly will. Now, what's interesting here, the storylines really aren't matching up with what we're seeing on the screen. So sea of red across the board. The last 2 days have been dismal in the sector. But if you look at the press releases and the news, even just today that have come out, it's all positive. It's all bullish. So we talk about Mara signing some new partnerships here. We've got upgrades from different analysts on different companies. We've got new directors coming to the board on these various companies, all positive catalysts. So we'll go through these quickly. Then we can talk about some of these co-location deals, which again, really provide some real numbers, some real figures to the fundamental analysis of these companies. So I mentioned Mara has signed a big partnership. We've covered this throughout the year. They've gone out and they've made these strategic partnerships really around the world. This one is with the Future Investment Initiation Institute, so essentially an incubator type company for AI type of opportunities. This is just the most recent example of a lot of these high level partnerships we've seen from the team at Mara.
It certainly is, and it's starting to show a little bit of what they're doing in terms of their strategy. I mean, up until a few months ago, Mara and CleanSpark were both, the pure play miners, both trying to grow hash rate, and just become the best in the mining space, having witnessed all their fellow peer miners literally transition and move across to HPC and direct power that way. The market really liked that move from the other miners, and I think CleanSpark and more have realised, now you've got to start thinking about the strategy themselves. And CleanSpark have done a 180 and are now revising all their sites. And Mara have just been carefully addressing this and buying into companies that are HPC data center providers. And, here's another example of having these partnerships in place. So I expect to see more and more of these. Mara's an enormous company with a lot of power, a lot of data centers. And this is one of the things that we found is the bottleneck in terms of HPC moving forward. There's a requirement for power, and the miners have got the power. Mara's got a substantial amount of power. It's the biggest mining company out there, and it's managed to address the fact that, in previous years it was an asset-light company. That's totally changed as well. Now they own probably between 70 and 80% of all their sites, and they're going to own 100% of their sites over the next 2 years as they start ending their hosting relationships to ensure that their sites remain 100% their own.
Yeah, good point there. I just heard Ben Gagnon talking about owning the means of production or the power generation as well. Mara has that wind farm already in their portfolio. You're quite right. They have a massive power pipeline, not to mention an impressive balance sheet with second most Bitcoin of any publicly traded company. We've got an announcement in terms of Q3 earnings coming out the first week of October. So it'll be interesting to get insight from Fred and the rest of the gang at Mara on how all these pieces of the puzzle really fit together for that next stage of their strategy. So that was the first kind of bullish catalyst we wanted to talk about. The second one here has to do with another analyst upgrade. So we've been covering these quite frequently on the channel. We talked about Cipher, about IREN, Bitfarms, Riot. Another one that's just received an upgrade here, Core Scientific. So we'll get into the details in a second, but again, very bullish, very favorable for these companies.
Yeah, and this is interesting to see. Remember, Core Scientific are in a quiet period as they await the finalisation of the results of the vote on whether to accept the CoreWeave deal, which comes to an end in less than a week's time now. But B. Riley, one of the investment banks there, have upgraded the Core Scientific share price from neutral with a price target of 30 now, up from originally 17. Now, we'll come on to Core Scientific in more detail in a short while. But again, this emphasizes that, not only do a lot of retail investors, but some of the investment banks are now seeing the likelihood that Core Scientific shareholders will vote down this pending takeover by CoreWeave.
Yeah, that one is one we're watching very closely on the channel. The next kind of catalyst, so to speak, is really the strengthening of the bench at a lot of these companies. So whether we're talking about the C-suite or the board of directors, we've seen a number of these announcements. Again, Riot, high-profile AI HPC hire. CleanSpark had one recently. Now Soluna, John Belizaire, has gone out and actually added another key member to their board of directors.
Yeah, and if we go back, Bryce, go back 7 or 8 months ago when we were in Fort Lauderdale and we were both on the stage for a presentation to talk about the mining companies. And Kevin Deedy made a really interesting point that day about, having these management teams was probably the most important part of the company, really, having the right team in place to deliver the strategy. And we've seen over this last sort of 4 or 5 months, a number of miners start adding to their boards, adding to their senior management teams, and adding people with a string of experience on their CVs in terms of, being in that data center space, high performance compute, AI, ticking all those boxes there. You can really see the strengthening. And this is another example today with Agnes Budzin, who's joining the Soluna's board of directors. Now, she's formerly BlackRock and Consensus executive, so, and a fintech leader in the space. So this will provide some, real experience to Soluna there. Remember, they've done amazingly well over the last few months there in terms of their growth. We were talking about Soluna 4 or 5 months ago as a company that was literally valued at about $8 million. They're in a different space now, and they're bringing out some great updates. And to keep that momentum, they're strengthening the board to continue that.
Yeah, really strength to strength there at Soluna. And the final piece of the pie is just really the overarching or macro conditions here. So we've talked about the improving share price or target prices for some of these companies. We've talked about the addition of new key members to the board and C-suite. We've talked about some of the HPC opportunities at play. If we jump over to ABTC's website, they just put out a new deck as well. Again, talking about how important both AI infrastructure on the HUD 8 side of things is, and on securing blockchain reliability and security through US-based Bitcoin mining or US hash rate.
Yeah, and we've talked about HUD 8 and ABTC, many times on the podcast, and obviously recently just highlighted the completion of the Vega site there in Texas, one of the largest mining facilities, spanning over 160,000 square feet. I mean, we've been to some big sites. This is a big building here. This is arguably, similar size to a couple of the buildings added together at the CORZ WULF site, which is one of the largest sites in Texas, and certainly will be from a power perspective. But this is another great update, great presentation, explaining the strategies that they're going through now to deliver in the rest of 2025 and through 2026 onwards.
And one interesting slide I noted there, they've got plans now to get up to 50 exahash at the same efficiency as IREN. So obviously American Bitcoin, ABTC, again, Eric Trump, part of this company, he's bullish on Bitcoin. He's bullish on Bitcoin mining. And of course, the HPC layer as well, which Asher and HUD 8 are more focused on. So this was interesting to see. Along, you talk about strategy, really positioning ABTC as kind of a hybrid between Bitcoin treasury companies and American-based Bitcoin mining.
Yeah, and this this roadmap to 50 exahash. I mean, they're going to, like you say, equal IREN in terms of achieving that same hash rate target and also the same efficiency for the mining machines. And we know that based, a lot of their facilities based in Texas, they're going to also get the same level of power. And we know IREN with those three metrics there are able to mine Bitcoin profitably even today now with the hash rate dropping below 50. It looks like HUT are going to be in a similar position where they'll be able to mine Bitcoin probably profitably all the way to the next halving, and then we'll see what happens then. When another 50% gets reduced from the rewards received every 10 minutes, that's going to be a challenge. But I think for the next 2.5 years before that next halving, plenty of opportunity for the company to make some profits and get to that 50 exahash. It wasn't too long ago, Bryce, we were talking to Asher when they hadn't been buying any mining equipment, and we were asking about retail investors were getting frustrated with regards to growth. He promised to do something. He promised that he would, buy machines at the right time and not just go out there and buy machines because they were available at the high prices. And believe you me, he stuck to that strategy, and you can see now the benefits of doing that. He's managed to, get a position now where he's going to grow significantly. Bear in mind, in March of 2025, they only had about 10 exahash. And phase 3 highlights that's going to grow fivefold to 50 exahash in short term. So this is really exciting news for them. And this is just one part of the business model, Bryce.
It really is, and it's exactly like what we're seeing out of Bitdeer and Hive, this aggressive growth, similar to IREN CleanSpark last year. The final slide we thought was interesting, and kind of a coincidence, I guess. The U.S. election cycle, the 4-year term, is synced up exactly with the 4-year Bitcoin halving cycle. We've got a very favorable administration in right now in terms of the U.S. President's office, and you can see over 40% of Americans now hold Bitcoin. Around 36% of the global hash rate is in the United States, and around 95% of the companies that hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet are US based. So, at a macro level, there is a lot of support for this industry, for having this stuff onshore. We talk a lot about data sovereignty as it relates to HPC and high performance computing. So, it really does seem a lot of these catalysts that we just reviewed are lined up favorably for the miners.
Yeah, you're quite right. I mean, America's sort of been dominating the Bitcoin space for quite a while now. I mean, we go back to the last election. I'm not suggesting 1 minute that Bitcoin won the election for Donald Trump, but you know what? It didn't do many harm, and you can see from the key positions in the administration. Very many of them are very, very pro Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And over the next 3 years, we'll see the benefits of that administration as we go forward, and then we'll see what happens there. But the Democrats look like they're starting to fall in line. Maybe they realise they've missed a trick and need to get on board with it.
Yeah, and we've seen Dennis Porter working closely with the Democrat side as well. Bitcoin really does span both sides of the aisle, and it's great to see more people getting involved. Now, we just touched on the fact that Core Scientific received a price target increase. That really is a great segue into the next portion here, comparing what we've seen in terms of these signed co-location deals between Cipher, Core Scientific, and TeraWulf. So you've done your handiwork here, Anthony, put together a great table. You can walk us through some of the numbers and really your findings here. As you guys can see, these are some big numbers. These are real contracts. They've already been signed. Our expectation is we will see more of these. And this is really that final piece of the pie for the Bitcoin miners and one of the major storylines or catalysts of the year.
Yeah, so I've just put together a table there highlighting the three companies, highlighting the contracts they've got there. I've used the market capitalization at the top there, and we'll come on to that again during this conversation. In terms of co-location partners, Cipher Mining have got a contract with Fluidstack supported by Google. Core Scientific, we know they've got that big deal with CoreWeave, and TeraWulf have got two contracts, one with Core 42 and one with Fluidstack, also supported by Google. Now, looking at the Core Scientific deal of 590, that's actually bigger than the two other contracts added together there. And if you look at the revenues, you can also see that if you add up the contracted revenue for Cipher Mining and TeraWulf, again, it falls short of the 10.1 billion revenues that Core Scientific are going to achieve. Now, that's over 12 years. The other two contracts are over 10 years. So, you could argue that they've got a slightly better deal from a revenue standpoint. All three contracts have got an extension period of 2 times 5 years. But this is where it gets really interesting on the capital expenditure. So Cipher Mining and TeraWulf are going for a really, really high level fit out for their refurbishment of these data centers. They're spending, between 8 and 11 million, both companies. Then I've used the midpoint for each of these companies, and you can see the capital expenditure there, 1.7 billion, or just short after Cipher Mining. Core Scientific, even though it's refurbishing 590 megawatts. It's doing a more of a hybrid solution, only 1.3 billion. And then TeraWulf is doing similar to what Cipher Mining, a really high level fit out there, 3.66 billion. Profit margins are very much similar there, but Cipher Mining and TeraWulf are stating in their presentations they're going to be slightly higher, heading towards 85, where Core Scientific at 80%. But again, we'll talk about the capital raises required. Now, we know that Core Scientific, they're doing this hybrid solution there, 750 million. And guess what? CoreWeave are paying that 750 million in advance. And it will be taken out of the revenue over the first 2 or 3 years at an amount which is no more than 50% of their revenue per year. So they're still going to get significant profit margins, even paying back the loan in those early periods. Whereas Cipher Mining and TeraWulf have had to raise significant amounts of money. Cipher just recently raised 1.3 billion through a convertible note, and TeraWulf have raised 4.2 billion, a million of that through a convertible note, and 3.2 billion through debt, which they'll be paying, an interest rate of about 7% over the future there. But again, both raising something else, but both getting really good deals. Now, when we look at the deals themselves, Core Scientific haven't had to give away any of the company in this deal at the moment. We look at Cipher Mining, they've had to give up 5.4%. If you look at this is where the market capitalization will come into it now. If you look at today's market capitalization, Google are effectively going to receive $328 million based on the share price today. And TeraWulf have given away 14%, which totals 655 million. Now, before you all start running for the hills and saying why they're giving away this money there, you've got to acknowledge when you have the likes of Google attached to a deal, the amount of doors that opens in terms of financing, in terms of raising capital, can't be really, highlighted enough. And we were very fortunate recently to, have some time with Patrick Fleury from TeraWulf, and we asked that very question to him, and he said, "Look, believe you me, it's well worth giving a portion of the company away to Google, knowing that they're going to be supporting that deal. And then when we go to a bank or an institution and look to raise capital, it's far more easier when you say Google are part of the deal structure. The challenges are when you're a smaller player initially like that, you might have to pay higher interest rates. But when you've got a hyperscaler joining in the game, then you're going to get some benefit, but it comes at a price. And both of these companies have had to give up some of their equity to get those deals through the window. But I think if you look at the long-term expectation of these, that those deals there are already 20 years with their extensions, and the revenues we're talking about will easily repay that sort of equity stake back multiple times more.
Yeah, it's a really good point you bring up. The ability of TeraWulf, case in point, to get a single-digit interest rate on $3.2 billion, probably not very realistic if Google was not part of that conversation. The other piece you brought up there that I wanted to double-click on, you talk about the duration of these contracts. We can clearly see how much money is on the table, what the ROI is, what the total length of the contract is. These are all variables we don't have any idea of in the Bitcoin mining space. We talk about difficulty and halving and global hash rate. There's so many unknowns. So you can clearly see why these companies are pivoting to HPC AI and why this re-rate is happening in the sector. So despite these last few days of pullback, at a fundamental level, you guys can see the numbers, the catalysts, the news, they're all pointed in that one direction.
They certainly are. And the reason we've highlighted this table is really down to the fact that one of these companies is actually being sought after, and CoreWeave have made a bid for Core Scientific back in July, which the retail shareholders are going to be voting on in the next sort of 5 or 6 days' time. That result will come out next week. A simple majority is required, which is 50% or 51% of the votes. And now when that deal was put into place back in July, the deal looked like a value of $9 billion, given a suggested price for Core Scientific of $20.40. The issue was, though, that this deal was based on the floating price of the CoreWeave share price, and at that particular date there when the deal was made, the CoreWeave share price was $165. Now fast forward to today, and the CoreWeave share price is $115. That's $50 less. Core Scientific share price isn't performing as badly. The share price today is $17.13, although it has dropped over 10% since yesterday, as of most of the miners. We've already covered that area it sells there. But the indicative price of this deal at the moment to Core Scientific shareholders, if they approve that deal, is $14.21. And the value of the contract is no longer at today's price worth $9 billion. It's $6.27 billion. Now, one person believes that that's a really good deal, and that's the CEO of CoreWeave, and he's standing firm on that $9 billion offer. Michael Intrater, who's the CEO, is basically saying, it's a deal, it's a nice to have. and major investors should be urging shareholders, to take on the deal. So from Core Scientific's perspective, two of their largest internal shareholders, 2Cs and the other situational awareness, have both basically told retail shareholders that this deal is not a value deal for them and they should really vote against it. So this goes against, obviously, the Core WULF CEO. I mean, obviously, got to take it from his perspective. I mean, if he gets the deal go ahead next week, he's buying a company not at $9 billion, but it's significantly less than $9 billion. It's a great deal. And we just highlighted on the previous slide, in terms of the revenues over the next 12 years, that's going to be $10 billion to Core Scientific, of which the majority, close to 80% of that, is effectively profit. And 80% of 10 billion, in my calculation, is $8 billion, which is probably higher than the contract value that will happen by next week. And the other factor to think about is also Core Scientific are not only moving to the HPC space, they've still got a sizable Bitcoin mining service there, about a 17 or 18 exahash that they're mining Bitcoin on a regular basis. Now, going forward, they might decide to use that power elsewhere. But at the moment, it's still being used for Bitcoin mining, providing really good cash flow as they build out these refurbished centers for the installation of the high performance compute GPUs. But it's a really compelling decision that shareholders have to make there, and we're just putting out the data out there for them to sort of help them with their due diligence. You can see from the market capitalization of Cipher, who haven't got anywhere near the size of the deal that Core Scientific. They're over $6 billion today, and Core Scientific are in the $5 billion range. So it really goes to show that potentially, it's not as great a deal as maybe Michael and Trader has put forward there. But the shareholders themselves, they have the power to do whatever they want to, and I'm sure they'll make their decision by next week, and we'll see the outcome and report on it when it comes out.
We sure will. Next week will be a big one to watch. And yeah, so interesting in this space. We talk about the volatility even in the last 2 days. These companies' market caps have gone up or down plus or minus 20, 30% in a few trading days, when realistically, fundamentally, nothing has changed at the companies. It shows you how difficult it is to value, to put together the sum of the parts. And hopefully today's video helped talk about a few of those fundamental underlying assets and, of course, the catalysts in the space. Now, we'd be curious to hear your thoughts. What did you think of the current deals that are in the market? Who do you think will be next to sign one of these co-location deals? We know Riot obviously has some big facilities. IREN is in the hunt as well. And realistically, most of these miners have now expressed interest in some sort of a partnership like this. So as we like to say, time will tell. Great update overall. Appreciate you putting the data together, Anthony. Hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe. We'll see you guys back here tomorrow.